The harmony of second chances. 3 weeks passed. Maya declined the position in international communications, despite Priya's insistence that she was being stubborn. "He's trying to help," her sister argued over breakfast in their small apartment. "Or salve his conscience," Maya countered, pouring more coffee. "Either way, I won't be a project for a privileged man having a moment of self-awareness." Priya rolled her eyes. "From what you've told me, it sounds like more than that." Maya couldn't deny the truth in her sister's words. Since the dinner with Yumiko, Alexander had begun stopping by during her shifts, bringing coffee and asking questions about Japanese phrases. Their conversations had evolved from awkward to engaging, with an undercurrent of attraction neither acknowledged openly. That evening, Maya arrived at work to find the executive floor unusually busy. Conference rooms were filled with people speaking rapid Japanese. "The Nakamura delegation is here for final negotiations," explained Tony from security. "Big contract, apparently." Maya nodded and began her usual routine, trying to work around the activity. She was cleaning the break room when raised voices caught her attention. Through the glass wall, she saw Alexander and several Japanese executives in what appeared to be a tense discussion. Their body language spoke of miscommunication and growing frustration. Without thinking, Maya set down her cleaning supplies and approached the conference room. She knocked gently and opened the door. "Excuse me," she said in English, then switched to Japanese. "I couldn't help but notice some difficulty. May I be of assistance?" The Japanese executives looked startled, then relieved when Maya continued in perfect Japanese. Alexander stared at her with mingled surprise and gratitude. "There seems to be a translation issue with the contract terms," she explained to Alexander after speaking with the senior executive. "The interpreter has misunderstood a key phrase about intellectual property rights." What followed was 2 hours of Maya facilitating communication, navigating cultural subtleties that the hired interpreter had missed. By midnight, the previously tense executives were smiling, contracts were signed, and Alexander was looking at Maya with undisguised admiration. As the delegation departed, Alexander touched Maya's elbow gently. "You just saved a $50 million deal," he said quietly. "Why are you still refusing the communications position?" Maya sighed. "Because I don't want to be given opportunities out of guilt or attraction." "What about merit?" he challenged. "What happened tonight had nothing to do with my feelings for you and everything to do with your exceptional skills." "Your feelings?" Maya echoed, her heart skipping. Alexander ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she now recognized as nervousness. "I think you know I'm attracted to you, but that's not why I offered you the position." Before she could respond, his phone rang. It was Yumiko, calling from the hospital. She'd fallen and fractured her hip. "I have to go," Alexander said, visibly shaken. "She has no one else here." "I'll come with you," Maya offered without hesitation. "She might be more comfortable with someone who speaks Japanese." At the hospital, they found Yumiko pale but alert. Her face brightened at the sight of Maya. "My dear," she said in Japanese, "how kind of you to come." While Alexander spoke with doctors, Maya sat with Yumiko, translating medical information and providing comfort. As the night deepened, Alexander watched their interaction from the doorway, struck by how naturally Maya had stepped into their lives, filling spaces he hadn't known were empty. Near dawn, with Yumiko finally asleep, they found themselves in the quiet hospital cafeteria. "She'll need help during recovery," Alexander said, his exhaustion evident. "I can hire a nurse, but she responds to you in a way she doesn't with others." Maya wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "I could visit her. It wouldn't be a burden." Alexander looked at her with such intensity that Maya had to glance away. "Why did you really turn down the position?" he asked softly. "I considered deflecting, then decided on honesty. Because I was afraid." "Of what?" of depending on someone else's goodwill, of stepping back into a world I'd left behind, of, she hesitated, of the way I feel when I'm with you. Alexander reached across the table, his hand covering hers. I was afraid too, of admitting I'd been wrong, of acknowledging that someone I'd once dismissed could become so important to me. Their eyes held, the barriers between them finally falling away. I've resubmitted the position as an open application, Alexander said. No special treatment. If you want it, you'll interview like anyone else. Maya smiled slightly. And if I get it, then you'll have earned it. His thumb traced circles on her palm. And I'll ask you to dinner, not as a janitor or an employee, but as a woman I'm falling in love with. Maya's breath caught. That's quite presumptuous. I'm working on that, he admitted with a rueful smile. Too many years of entitlement. It needs work, she agreed, but turned her hand to intertwine her fingers with his. 1 month later, Maya sat across from the HR director and a panel of executives, answering questions about international communication strategies. Alexander was notably absent, having recused himself from the hiring process. That evening, she found him waiting in the lobby. Well, he asked, his expression carefully neutral. I start next Monday, she replied, unable to contain her smile, as communications liaison for the Asian markets. Alexander's face broke into a grin. Congratulations! You deserve it! I know, Maya said with newfound confidence. Now, I believe you mentioned dinner. As they walked out together, Maya reflected on the strange twists of fate that had led them here, from invisibility to recognition, from judgment to understanding, from separate worlds to a shared journey. Behind them, Yumiko watched from her wheelchair where she'd been coincidentally passing through the lobby. She smiled knowingly as her grandson held the door open for Maya, their bodies gravitating towards each other with the natural harmony of two people discovering that sometimes second chances come in the most unexpected forms. Outside, the setting sun painted the city in shades of possibility as Maya and Alexander stepped forward together into a future neither had imagined but both now embraced. A future built not on assumptions or appearances, but on the profound understanding that comes when we truly see each other for who we are.
The return. The silence in Sophie's apartment hung heavy as Nathan sat across from her, the little boy, Leo, quietly coloring at the coffee table between them. Sophie had wordlessly let them in, more from shock than forgiveness. Nathan looked different, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes and a weariness that hadn't been there before. His expensive watch and tailored clothes had been replaced by a simple sweater and jeans. I don't even know where to start, he said finally. The beginning would be nice, Sophie replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Who is he, Nathan? Nathan glanced at Leo with a gentleness that tugged at Sophie's heart, despite her anger. He's my son. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. 5 years ago, before I started Horizon, I was in a relationship with a woman named Elise. We were together for almost a year before we went our separate ways. Amicably, I thought. Nathan's eyes remained on Leo. I had no idea she was pregnant when we broke up. She never told me. Sophie watched Leo carefully filling in a dinosaur with a blue crayon, his small face scrunched in concentration. The resemblance to Nathan was subtle, but unmistakable in the shape of his eyes and the determined set of his jaw. Elise was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer last year. She contacted me when her condition worsened. That text I sent you, I just received her email with pictures of Leo. Nathan pulled out his phone, showing Sophie the message that had changed everything. She didn't want anything from me all these years. She built a life for them in Switzerland, away from media attention. But she was dying, Sophie. She had no family, and Leo would become a ward of the state in a foreign country. So you just left, without a word? The hurt in Sophie's voice was palpable. I was in shock. I flew to Zurich that night, thinking I'd be back in a few days once I understood the situation. Nathan's voice cracked. But when I got there, things were worse than I imagined. Elise had weeks, not months. Leo didn't know me at all. The idea of telling you over the phone that I suddenly had a child. He shook his head. I convinced myself a clean break would be easier for you. Easier? Sophie's composure finally fractured. Do you have any idea what these months have been like? The humiliation, the worry, the pain? Her voice rose, causing Leo to look up anxiously. Nathan winced. I was wrong. Terribly wrong. Once I was there, everything happened so fast. Elise deteriorated quickly. There were custody papers, arrangements to make, Leo's fear and grief to manage. By the time I could think clearly, weeks had passed, and I was too ashamed to reach out. Sophie noticed Leo watching them with wide eyes. She took a deep breath, lowering her voice. And Elise? She passed away 2 months ago, Nathan said quietly. Leo and I stayed in Switzerland until everything was settled. We've been back in the States for 3 weeks, staying at my house in Maine while Leo adjusts. Why come back now? Sophie asked, the question that had been burning inside her. Nathan met her eyes directly for the first time. Because running away from you was the biggest mistake of my life. Because Leo deserves stability and honesty. Because despite everything, I never stopped loving you. Leo approached them, clutching his drawing. I made this for you, he said, shyly, holding the paper out to Sophie. She accepted it with trembling hands, a blue and green swirl that vaguely resembled the ocean. Thank you, Leo. It's beautiful. Daddy says you know all about the ocean, Leo said, his face brightening. Do you know about sharks? They're my favorite. Something shifted in Sophie's chest as she looked at this small person who had unwittingly changed the course of her life. Yes, she said softly, I know quite a bit about sharks. Nathan watched them, hope and regret battling in his expression. We should go. I just wanted you to know the truth, all of it. As they prepared to leave, Sophie found herself at a crossroad she'd never anticipated. The man she'd loved and mourned stood before her, asking for nothing but offering everything, the truth, a chance, a future she'd never imagined. Nathan, she said as he reached for the doorknob, come back tomorrow. We can talk more then. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't a promise, but it was a beginning. Building bridges. Sophie arrived at the small beachside park 15 minutes early, watching families enjoy the late spring sunshine. She spotted Nathan and Leo instantly, the boy racing ahead toward the playground, while Nathan followed at a measured pace, carrying a small backpack. He's been excited all morning, Nathan said as he reached her. He's not stopped talking about the shark lady. Despite herself, Sophie smiled. I brought something for him. She pulled out a small, plush hammerhead shark from her tote bag. They watched Leo navigate the playground, occasionally glancing their way as if ensuring they were still there. The domesticity of the scene wasn't lost on Sophie, how easily they might have been mistaken for a family. How are you really doing with all this? Sophie asked. Nathan ran a hand through his hair. Terrified most of the time. Parenting doesn't come with a manual, especially not when you start with a 4-year-old who's lost everything familiar. His honesty was disarming. The company's running fine without me. James is doing a better job than I expected. And Leo? How's he adjusting? He has nightmares. Asks for his mom. The child psychologist says it's normal grief. Nathan's voice softened. But he's resilient. Yesterday he laughed for the first time since we left Switzerland. Really laughed. It felt like witnessing a miracle. Sophie studied Nathan's face, the same features she'd fallen in love with, now marked with new lines of worry and responsibility. The man who disappeared wasn't the same one sitting beside her now. I filed the adoption paperwork last week to make everything official. Leo needs stability. Daddy, watch! Leo called from the top of the slide, waving enthusiastically. I'm watching, buddy. Great job! Nathan called back, his entire demeanor transforming. He adores you, Sophie observed. I don't deserve it, Nathan admitted, but I'm trying to be worthy of his trust. After the playground, they walked along the beach, Leo skipping ahead to collect shells. Sophie presented him with the plush hammerhead shark, which he immediately clutched to his chest with a delighted grin. What's his name? Leo asked, examining the toy with serious consideration. He doesn't have one yet, Sophie replied. He's waiting for you to name him. Leo thought for a moment. Bubbles, he declared, with the confidence only a child could muster. Later, as Leo napped on a beach blanket, exhausted from play and sea air, Sophie and Nathan finally had the conversation they'd been circling for weeks. I want to be clear about something, Sophie said. I didn't agree to these meetings because I've forgiven you. I'm here because that little boy deserves kindness, and because I need to understand what happened to move forward, with or without you in my life. Nathan nodded. That's fair, more than fair. The man I knew, the man I agreed to marry, wouldn't have disappeared without explanation, no matter the circumstances. Sophie hugged her knees to her chest. That's what I can't reconcile. I've asked myself that question every day, Nathan confessed, how I could hurt the woman I love that way. He paused. When I saw Leo for the first time, something shifted inside me. Suddenly, I wasn't just responsible for my life or my company. I was responsible for this innocent child who'd already lost so much. I panicked, made decisions from fear rather than courage. Sophie watched Leo sleep, his small chest rising and falling, Bubbles the shark tucked under his arm. I don't expect your forgiveness, Sophie, but I want you to know that I'm not asking you to become an instant mother. Leo and I are a package deal now, yes, but if there's any chance for us, it would be on your terms, at your pace. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in familiar hues of orange and pink, Sophie made a decision, not about forgiveness or their future, but about tomorrow. There's a marine touch pool exhibit opening at the aquarium. Leo might enjoy it. It wasn't a promise of forever, but it was another beginning.
The weight of autumn leaves. The Seattle skyline emerged through morning fog as Emma drove across the bridge, May secure in her car seat. 3 suitcases contained the essentials of their life, leaving the cottage furnished but vacant. She'd written separate letters to both men, asking for the space to make this journey alone. Her old apartment building looked smaller somehow, less imposing than in her memory. Emma parked in her designated space, still available despite her months away. The doorman's surprise quickly melted into warm congratulations at the sight of May. Emma didn't go to her old home, not yet. Instead, she directed the elevator to the 15th floor, where glass doors displayed Chin and Associates architecture. Heads turned as she walked through the office, May strapped against her chest. Some faces registered shock, others awkward sympathy. Emma moved past them all until she reached the corner office, where Nathan's name adorned the door. He looked up from his drafting table, disbelief washing over his features. "Emma, we need to talk," she said simply. They settled in the office's sitting area, May asleep against Emma's chest. Through the windows, autumn leaves drifted down from trees lining the avenue below. "I'm not coming home," Emma began, watching him absorb the blow. "Not to our old life, our old patterns." Nathan nodded slowly, grief etching into his features. "But," she continued, "I am staying in Seattle. I've accepted the associate professor position at the university, the one I turned down when we decided to start a family." "I don't understand," Nathan said, hope and confusion warring in his voice.
Emma shifted May to her other arm. What happened between us broke something fundamental, Nathan. Trust isn't rebuilt with apologies or baby furniture. It's rebuilt with time and consistent actions. You're giving me that time? The question held fragile optimism. I'm giving us both time, Emma clarified. I've leased an apartment near campus. I'll be bringing May to daycare 3 days a week while I teach. You can see her as often as you want. Be the father she deserves. And us? Is there any chance for us? Emma reached across the space between them, touching his hand lightly. I don't know. That's the honest answer. These months away gave me something I'd lost, myself. The woman who arrived in Whispering Cove was defined by her heartbreak. The woman sitting before you is defined by her choices. Nathan's thumb brushed over her knuckles. What about Julian? He loves you. I saw it every time he looked at you. The question surprised her. How did you know I'd choose Seattle over him? I didn't. But I know you, Emma. You wouldn't be here unless you'd made a definitive choice. Emma smiled sadly. Julian offered something beautiful, a fresh start, a simple life by the sea, but running toward him would be another form of running away. From what? From the harder path, from seeing if what broke can be remade into something stronger. She paused, looking down at their sleeping daughter. I called Julian this morning. He understood, and that way he always does. A tear slipped down Nathan's cheek. I don't deserve this chance. This isn't about deserving, Emma replied. It's about choosing the future that feels right for me, for May. Right now, that future includes you in some capacity. What that looks like depends on both of us. That evening, Emma stood in her new apartment, smaller than their luxury condo, but flooded with afternoon light. She brought the sunflowers, her first independent purchase after leaving, and placed them in the window where they caught the fading sunlight. Nathan had helped carry her suitcases, then left with a promise to return tomorrow with lunch and without expectations. The weight of their complicated history hung between them, neither fully resolved nor abandoned. As darkness fell, Emma opened the gift Julian had pressed into her hands during their goodbye, a leather-bound journal with a note inside. For recording new chapters, your story isn't finished, it's just taking an unexpected turn. Always your friend, Jay. Beside it, she placed Nathan's offering, a small wooden sculpture of a mother and child carved during sleepless nights of regret. May stirred in her bassinet, her tiny hands reaching skyward. Emma lifted her daughter, breathing in her perfect newborn scent. We're home, she whispered, uncertain if she meant this apartment, this city, or this new version of herself, a woman who had walked through fire and emerged not unscathed, but unquestionably stronger. Outside, autumn leaves continued their descent, carried by winds of change, each one finding its own path to the ground below. Emma watched them fall, no longer afraid of where she might land.